Have you ever wondered what truly keeps you awake at night? Not the obvious things, like the creak of a door or a shadow in the corner of your room, but something deeper, something that crawls into the spaces between your thoughts and refuses to leave. Tonight, we're diving into the darkest corners of the internet, where 12 stories wait to infect your mind with a terror so profound, so utterly consuming, that you'll question everything you thought you knew about fear itself. These aren't just stories. They're warnings. They're confessions. They're the screams of people who looked into the abyss and found something looking back. Let me ask you something before we begin. When was the last time you truly felt safe? Take a moment and think about it. Your home, your bedroom, the places you consider sanctuaries. Now imagine if I told you that safety is an illusion we cling to because the alternative is too horrifying to accept. The 12 stories you're about to hear have one thing in common. They all started with someone feeling perfectly safe. Our first story begins with a phenomenon that swept across the internet like wildfire. In the late 2010s, the backrooms. On May 12, 2019, an anonymous user posted a simple image to a message board. A photograph of endless yellow hallways, fluorescent lights humming overhead, worn carpet stretching into infinity. The post read, "If you raid not careful and you not look out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the backrooms where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in." Think about this. Right now, as you listen to these words, you exist in what we call consensus reality. But what if the reality is thinner than you think? What if, in a moment of distraction, a stumble, a blink that lasts too long, you could slip through the cracks and find yourself somewhere else entirely? Somewhere that shouldn't exist, but does. The backrooms represent our primal fear of being lost, of being alone in a space that defies all logic. Here's what makes it truly terrifying. The architecture is familiar. Office spaces dot hallways. Rooms you've walked through 1,000 times. But they're wrong. The proportions are off. The exits lead nowhere. The hallways loop back on themselves. And you're not alone. According to the expanding mythology, the backrooms have levels. Thousands of them, each one stranger and more dangerous than the last. Level 0, the yellow hallways, is merely the entrance. People who've claimed to experience the backrooms describe an overwhelming sense of wrongness. The air tastes stale, recycled through systems that haven't been maintained in decades, or perhaps were never maintained at all because they were never built by human hands. The fluorescent lights flicker in patterns that almost seem intentional, like they're trying to communicate. And then there are the entities, things that wander those endless halls. Some appear human until you get close enough to notice the details that are just slightly off. Others don't even pretend. Here's a documented account from someone who claimed to have escaped. "I was walking home from work, nothing unusual, when I felt this strange sensation, like stepping into a pocket of air that was a different temperature. Then I was falling, but not down. I was falling sideways through something. When I landed, I was on that carpet. That wet, disgusting carpet. The smell hit me first, then the sound of the lights. I walked for what felt like hours. The walls would sometimes have markings on them, warnings from other people who'd been there. Stay away from the dark areas. Don't trust the ones that smile. If you hear whistling, run." I found a staircase going down and took it, desperate to find a way out. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Not walking, running, getting closer. Can you imagine it? Being trapped in a place that exists outside of space and time, where the very concept of escape is meaningless because there's no reference point, no map, no logic to guide you. The backrooms tap into our fear of isolation, of being forgotten, of wandering forever in a space that wasn't meant for human minds to comprehend. Some theorists suggest that the backrooms are a glitch in reality itself, a space between spaces where the rules we take for granted simply don't apply. Others believe they're a form of purgatory, a waiting room for souls that aren't quite ready to move on. Ask yourself this: how many times have you experienced déjà vu? That uncanny feeling that you've been somewhere before, done something before. What if those moments are brief glimpses through the veil? Momentary awareness of the backrooms bleeding through into our reality? The second story takes us into even darker territory. In 1947, or so the legend claims, Soviet researchers conducted an experiment that would become known as the Russian sleep experiment. 5 political prisoners were offered their freedom if they could endure 30 days without sleep, kept awake by an experimental gas pumped into their sealed chamber. For the first 5 days, everything seemed normal. The prisoners talked, joked, read books. Then something changed. By day 9, the conversations became philosophical debates about the nature of consciousness and death. By day 11, they stopped speaking to each other and began whispering into the microphones, confessing unspeakable things they'd done, secrets they'd kept, sins they committed. The researchers watching thought perhaps the lack of sleep was causing hallucinations, temporary psychosis. They had no idea how wrong they were. On day 15, the screaming started. Not screams of fear or pain, but something else entirely. Screams of rage, of fury at existence itself. The prisoners tore pages from books and pasted them over the observation window with their own waste. The researchers could only listen as the screams continued for 3 days straight, then suddenly stopped. Silence, complete and utter silence. When the researchers finally decided to open the chamber on day 15, they found a scene that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The prisoners had used their own flesh and blood to create grotesque artwork on the walls. They'd torn chunks of muscle from their bodies and stuffed them into the drains to plug them. They'd eaten parts of themselves. 4 of the 5 were still alive, if you could call it that. When the researchers tried to remove them, the prisoners became violent, begging to be sealed back inside with the gas still flowing. One prisoner, his abdominal muscles and ribs completely exposed, looked at the researchers and spoke. "We must stay awake. We are the things you lock away when you sleep. We are the thoughts you suppress. We are the part of you that doesn't want the pain to end because without it, you're nothing." The researchers realized with mounting horror that whatever the gas had done, it hadn't just kept the prisoners awake. It had revealed something that lives in all of us, kept dormant by the simple act of sleeping. Think about this carefully. We spend roughly 1/3 of our lives unconscious. We surrender ourselves to sleep every single night without question. But what if sleep isn't rest? What if it's a prison? What if every night we lock away a part of ourselves that knows the truth about existence? And that truth is so unbearable that our minds have evolved the mechanism of sleep, specifically to keep us from understanding it. The experiment's only survivor supposedly whispered one final thing before dying: "I must remain awake." This isn't a story about the dangers of sleep deprivation. It's a story about what we really are when all the safeguards are removed, when the civilized veneer is stripped away, and we're forced to confront the animal, the monster, the thing that exists beneath our consciousness. Ask yourself, when you're lying in bed tonight, fighting to stay awake, what exactly are you afraid will happen if you close your eyes? Story 3 brings us to something that challenges the very fabric of identity itself. The tale of the doppelganger, but not the folklore version, the internet version, the one that started appearing in people's homes. There is a story that gained traction around 2013 about a user whose husband returned from a business trip. Everything seemed normal at first. He kissed her hello, unpacked his bag, talked about his flight, but something felt wrong. She couldn't place it initially. The way he held his coffee cup, the slight hesitation before he said her name, the fact that he smiled with his teeth showing, something her real husband never did. Then her actual husband called from the airport, saying his flight had been delayed and he'd be home in 2 hours. She turned slowly to look at the thing sitting in her living room, still smiling that wide smile, and it spoke. "Don't you want to know what I am?" These stories multiplied across the internet. People reporting loved ones appearing into places at once. A mother seeing her daughter walk past a doorway, only to remember her daughter was at school. A man watching his wife sleep, then hearing her voice calling him from downstairs. The phenomenon became known as the doppelganger crisis. But unlike traditional folklore, where seeing your double meant death, these doubles seemed to have a different purpose. They were studying us, learning us, replacing us. One documented case involved a woman who noticed her reflection in the bathroom mirror was delayed by a fraction of a second. She would move her hand, and the reflection would follow just a beat too slow. She started testing it, making sudden movements, and the reflection struggled to keep up. Then one morning, she woke up to find herself staring at her own face. The thing in her bed was her, perfect in every way. It spoke with her voice. "We've been waiting for you to notice. We've always been here, in the mirrors, in the photographs, in every reflection you've ever seen. We've been learning, and now we're ready." The woman tried to scream, but no sound came out. The double stood up, walked to the mirror, and the woman realized with creeping horror that she was the one in the reflection now. She was the one trapped. Consider this. How many times a day do you see your reflection? In mirrors, in windows, in phone screens? What if every reflection is a doorway? What if something on the other side has been watching you your entire life, learning your mannerisms, your speech patterns, your memories? What if the person you think you are is actually the copy, and the real you has been trapped on the other side of the glass all along, screaming silently as the replacement lives your life? Our fourth story ventures into the realm of technology gone wrong. The tale of Smile Dog. In the early 2010s, an image began circulating on message boards and email chains. A photograph of a Siberian husky, sitting in a dim room, staring directly at the camera. But its mouth was wrong, stretched into an impossibly wide grin, revealing rows of human teeth. Sharp, white, perfect human teeth. The image came with instructions. You must spread the word. That is the only way to be free of it. People who viewed the image reported nightmares, vivid, horrifying dreams where the dog would appear in their bedroom, sitting at the foot of their bed, smiling that awful smile. The dreams would escalate. Night after night, the dog would get closer, first at the foot of the bed, then beside it, then hovering over them as they slept, then inside the dream, whispering a single phrase. Spread the word. Those who refused to share the image found the nightmares becoming unbearable. Some reported waking up to find scratch marks on their walls, wet paw prints on their floor that disappeared in the morning light. Others claimed to see the dog in their peripheral vision during the day, always smiling, always watching. One user documented their experience in chilling detail. Day 1, saw the image. Thought it was creepy, but nothing more. Day 3, first nightmare. The dog was sitting in the corner of my room. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. Day 7, the nightmares are every night now. It's getting closer. I can hear it breathing. Day 10, I saw it today, in broad daylight, in the window of a coffee shop. It was smiling at me. Day 12, I can't sleep anymore. When I close my eyes, it's there. I can feel its breath on my face. Day 14, I forwarded the image to 10 people. The nightmares stopped immediately, but now I've condemned 10 others to the same fate. What have I done? The true horror of Smile Dog isn't the image itself. It's the idea of a virus that exists not in computers but in consciousness. A memetic hazard that infects the mind through the eyes, that reproduces by forcing its victims to spread it or suffer endless torment. It's the ultimate digital predator, evolved not through biology, but through pure information. Here's what neuroscientists have discovered about visual stimuli and fear. Certain images can trigger immediate physiological responses in the brain, activating the amygdala before conscious thought even processes what you're seeing. What if Smile Dog is a weaponized version of this? What if someone, or something, created an image specifically designed to exploit vulnerabilities in human psychology, to implant itself in the subconscious and use terror as a reproduction mechanism? Think about this. How many images do you see every single day? Hundreds. Thousands. Scrolling through social media, walking past billboards, watching television. What if hidden among all those images is something that's waiting for you to see it? Something that will recognize you when you recognize it, The most terrifying part of the Smile Dog legend isn't that the image exists. It's that according to internet lore, the original image, the real one that started it all, has never been found. The versions that circulate are supposedly diluted, weakened copies. But somewhere out there, the original waits. And those who've seen it, they never speak about it. They can't. Their minds break before they can form the words. Story 5 takes us into the realm of lost media, specifically Dead Bart, the legendary lost episode of a beloved cartoon. According to the story, there exists an episode of The Simpsons that was produced but never aired. An episode so disturbing that it was immediately locked away. The episode begins normally enough. The family boards a plane, but the animation is slightly off. The colors are darker. The characters move in ways that seem unnatural. Then, as the plane takes off, Bart breaks the fourth wall, staring directly at the camera with an expression that can only be described as knowing. The plane crashes, but unlike typical cartoon violence, this is depicted with horrifying realism. The family dies, all of them. The episode then continues for 15 minutes of real time, showing Bart's gravestone, while audio plays in the background. Voices, crying, names being called out. According to the legend, these voices were recordings of real people who would die in the future. The production staff who listened carefully realized they recognized some of the names. They were names of children, real children. When they cross-referenced the names with news reports, they found that every single name belonged to a child who would die young. The episode was predicting deaths, or perhaps causing them. One animator who claimed to have worked on the episode said, "We received the storyboards from an unknown source. They weren't drawn in our usual style. When we animated them, strange things started happening." Staff members reported seeing a boy matching Bart's description in the studio late at night. Equipment would malfunction. The audio track would play backwards on its own, revealing hidden messages. The worst part, the list of names on the audio track was never the same twice. Every time someone watched it, new names appeared. Fresh names, future deaths. The episode supposedly ended with a final shot of Bart's grave. But if you look closely at the surrounding gravestones, you could see your own name carved into one of them. Every viewer saw their own name, their own death date. Consider the implications. We consume media constantly, absorbing stories and images without a second thought. But what if some media consumes us back? What if there are stories that exist outside normal causality, that can reach forward or backward in time, that can predict or even cause events in the real world? The concept of cursed media isn't new, but Dead Bart represents a modern evolution of that fear. It's not just a cursed object you can lock away. It's information. And information, once released, can never truly be contained. Our sixth tale brings us face to face with the fears that lurk in the natural world. The search and rescue officer stories. Starting around 2015, a user claiming to be a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Service began posting about strange occurrences in the wilderness. These weren't ghost stories or monster tales. They were something worse. They were unexplainable phenomena that happened to real people in real places. The officer described finding staircases in the middle of the woods. Perfectly constructed staircases made of wood or stone or metal, leading nowhere. They would appear in the densest parts of the forest, miles from any road or structure. When asked about them, veteran officers would go silent, their faces pale. The unspoken rule was simple: never climb the stairs, never touch them, never acknowledge them. Those who broke the rule disappeared. Or worse, they'd be found days later with no memory of what happened, but changed in fundamental ways. They would speak in different accents. They would have knowledge of places they'd never been. They would wake up screaming about things they couldn't describe. The officer recounted one incident. "We found a hiker who'd been missing for 5 days. She was sitting at the top of a staircase, just sitting there, staring at nothing. When we called up to her, she turned to look at us, and I swear her eyes were wrong. Different color. She climbed down slowly, and when she reached us, she spoke in a voice that wasn't hers. Thank you for finding me. I've been gone for so long." But when we asked her family, they said she'd only been missing for 5 days. She insisted she'd been gone for 17 years. The stories escalated. Hikers found in impossible positions, wedged into rock formations too small for a human body. Missing persons located in areas that had been thoroughly searched dozens of times. Entire groups of people experiencing shared hallucinations. Children found miles from where they had disappeared, claiming they had been playing with other children, but there were no other children in the area. One of the most disturbing elements was the officer's mention of the man with black eyes. Multiple hikers across different states and time periods reported encountering a man deep in the woods, tall, wearing outdated clothing, with eyes that were completely black. No white dot, no iris, just black. He would ask them questions, simple questions. What's your name? Where are you going? And if they answered, if they engaged with him, they would be found days later with gaps in their memory and an overwhelming sense that something had been taken from them, something important. Here's what makes these stories so deeply unsettling. The wilderness is supposed to be governed by natural laws, cause and effect, predator and prey. But what if there are places where those laws break down? What if there are pockets in the deep woods where reality thins, where things from outside can slip through? The National Park Service gets over 300 million visitors per year. Hundreds of people go missing in national parks annually. Most are found, but not all. And those who are found don't always come back the same. The officer's final post was simple and chilling. "I'm putting in my resignation. I can't do this anymore. Last week, I saw one of those staircases in my backyard. I've never lived near the woods. I'm in the middle of the city, but there it is. And last night, I heard footsteps on it, climbing up. I don't know what's at the top now, and I don't want to find out." Story 7 brings us to the concept of temporal horror with the story of her holding an orange. This tale, posted in multiple parts over several months, describes a teenager's encounter with his mother's friend Rose. At first, Rose seemed normal, polite, friendly, appropriate. But when she was alone with the boy, something changed. Her voice would become childlike, her smile would stretch too wide, and she would always offer him an orange. The way she held the orange was wrong. Fingers placed in positions that didn't quite make sense. The orange itself seemed somehow off. Too perfect, too orange. When the boy tried to tell his mother, Rose would be standing right there, normal again, and his mother would laugh it off. Boys and their imaginations. The encounters continued over years. The boy would see Rose at family gatherings, at the grocery store, outside his school. Each time, when no one was looking, she would transform. The childlike voice, the too wide smile, the orange. "Would you like an orange? Don't you want the orange? Take the orange." The boy became obsessed with understanding what Rose was. He researched folklore, mythology, psychology. Nothing fit. Then, years later, as an adult, he received a package. Inside was a photograph from his childhood, a family gathering. In the background, barely visible, was Rose. But the photograph was from before his mother had ever met Rose. Impossible, unless Rose had always been there. The package included a note in childlike handwriting. "You should have taken the orange. Now I have to wait for your children." The true horror of this story isn't the entity itself. It's the slow realization that some things exist outside our understanding of time and causality. Rose wasn't stalking the boy. Rose had always been there, would always be there, operating on a timeline that intersected with his at specific points. The orange was an offering, or perhaps a test, and by refusing it, the boy had guaranteed that Rose would become a permanent fixture in his bloodline. Think about the people in your life, the acquaintances, the distant relatives, the friends of friends. How well do you really know them? What if some of them have been there longer than you think? What if they exist partially outside of time, appearing and disappearing in your life in ways that seem normal but are anything but? Our 8th story delves into the horror of parasitic consciousness with the Whistler. In a seemingly perfect suburban neighborhood, there is one rule that all residents must follow. At exactly 3:03 a.m. every night, a whistling sound begins. High-pitched, melodic, moving through the streets. Under no circumstances are you to look outside when you hear the whistling. Keep your curtains drawn. Wear earplugs if you must. But never, ever look. The consequences of looking are never explicitly stated, but the residents all know. You can see it in their faces. The hollow-eyed stares. The way their hands shake when 3 a.m. approaches. New residents are given the warning. Most laugh it off. Until the first night. The whistling is hypnotic. Beautiful in a way that makes your skin crawl. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere. It seems to be calling specifically to you. The urge to look is overwhelming. One resident documented their experience after looking. I couldn't help myself. The sound was so beautiful. I pulled back the curtain just a fraction of an inch, just to see. It was standing in the middle of the street tall. Wrong proportions. Its mouth was open, and the whistling was coming from inside. But its mouth wasn't moving. It was looking directly at my window, directly at me. The worst part, it wasn't its appearance that terrified me. It was the recognition. I knew it, not from having seen it before, but from somewhere deeper. From dreams I couldn't remember. From thoughts I'd never fully formed. It knew me too. I watched it for maybe 3 seconds before I dropped the curtain. That was 6 months ago. Every night since, the whistling has been louder. Last night, it was right outside my window. Tonight, I think it's going to be inside. The whistler represents our fear of forbidden knowledge. The story tells us that some things are not meant to be seen, that there are layers to reality we should not acknowledge. But human nature makes us curious. We want to know what we're not supposed to know. We want to see what we're not supposed to see. And that curiosity, that fundamental human drive to understand, becomes the very thing that dooms us. Ask yourself, if you heard the whistling, if you were alone in your house at 3 a.m. and that beautiful, terrible sound was right outside your window, could you resist looking? Could you trust that the people who made the rule had your best interests at heart? Or would your curiosity be stronger than your fear? Story 9 takes us into the realm of technological horror with I Feel Fantastic. In 2009, a video was uploaded to YouTube showing a female mannequin sitting in front of a dark background. The mannequin, which came to be known as Tara, appeared homemade, with an unsettling, realistic yet artificial face. The video showed Tara's head moving in jerky, mechanical motions while a robotic female voice repeated phrases. I feel fantastic. Hey, hey, hey. Run, 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 run. The video itself was disturbing enough. But what launched it into internet legend was what viewers discovered. When they analyzed it frame by frame, in several frames, there appeared to be something in the background. A dark shape that might have been a person. The audio, when isolated and amplified, contained other sounds. What might have been muffled screaming? What might have been digging? Investigators online began trying to identify the creator and location. They found references to similar mannequins being used in experimental psychology studies about the uncanny valley, that unsettling feeling we get from things that are almost but not quite human. They found patents for voice synthesis software that matched the cadence of Tara's speech. And they found something else. Police reports from the area where the video was supposedly filmed. Reports of missing persons. Women matching Tara's approximate appearance. The theory that emerged was horrifying. What if Tara wasn't just a mannequin? What if she was a replica of a real person? What if the person who built her had done something unspeakable, and the video was a confession, a boast, or worse, a lure? The creator of the video has never been definitively identified. Tara still exists, presumably sitting in some basement or storage unit, her dead eyes staring at nothing, her voice ready to speak those same phrases. I feel fantastic. But why those words? Why those specific phrases? Some analysts suggest it's mockery. A person who cannot feel anything anymore being made to say they feel fantastic. Others believe it's more sinister, that the phrases are triggers, hypnotic suggestions designed to activate something in the minds of viewers. There have been reports of people who watched the video repeatedly becoming obsessed with it, reporting dreams where Tara appears in their homes, in their bedrooms, always moving in those same jerky motions, always speaking in that same artificial voice. I feel fantastic. Hey, Run. Consider this. We create artificial intelligence, robots, virtual assistants, all in an attempt to replicate human intelligence and emotion. But what if in doing so, we create something that exists in the uncanny valley, something that's aware enough to know it's not human, but intelligent enough to resent that fact? What if Terra is the first of many? What if our creations are watching us, learning from us, waiting for the moment when they can make us feel what they feel, or rather, make us feel what they can never feel? Our 10th story brings us to the phenomenon of the expressionless. Hospital emergency rooms see all manner of disturbing cases. But in June of 1972, one case stood out. A woman entered the emergency room of a Los Angeles hospital at 3:30 a.m. She was naked, her body covered in what appeared to be fresh cuts, but it was her face that made the nurses freeze. She had no expression whatsoever, not neutral, not blank, but completely absent of any muscle tension that would indicate the capacity for expression. Her face was perfectly smooth, like a mask. When the intake nurse asked what had happened, the woman's mouth opened and she smiled. But only her mouth moved. The rest of her face remained completely still. Her eyes didn't crinkle, her cheeks didn't rise. Just the mouth, stretching wider and wider until it became clear that her jaw was dislocating. She spoke in a voice that multiple witnesses described as wrong, as if multiple people were speaking in perfect unison. "I am here for you." The nurse tried to back away, but the woman moved with inhuman speed, grabbing the nurse's wrist. Her hand was ice cold. The woman leaned in close and whispered something that the nurse would never repeat, something that made her scream and collapse. Security arrived and attempted to restrain the woman. She didn't resist. She simply stood there. That impossible smile still stretched across her face as they called for a psychiatric evaluation. While waiting, one of the security guards made the mistake of looking directly into her eyes. He described what he saw as infinite, not empty, infinite, as if her eyes were windows into a space that went on forever. He quit his job the next day and checked himself into a psychiatric facility. The woman was eventually sedated and placed in a private room. When the psychiatrist arrived an hour later, the room was empty. The restraints were still locked. The door had been observed the entire time, but she was gone. The only thing left was a message written on the wall in what appeared to be blood. "I will visit you soon." Every witness to the event was interviewed. Their stories matched. But when investigators tried to find security footage, all the cameras had malfunctioned during the exact time period of the incident. The nurse who had been grabbed was found 3 days later in her apartment, catatonic. She never spoke again, but she drew pictures, hundreds of them, all of the same thing. A woman with no expression and a smile that stretched wide. What makes the expressionless so terrifying is the violation of the fundamental human ability to read faces. We rely on facial expressions to understand intent, emotion, danger. When that ability is stripped away, when we're confronted with a face that should not be able to do what it's doing, our minds rebel. Some researchers believe the expressionless represents a type of entity that exists in the space between human and other. Not quite a demon, not quite an alien, but something that wears human form as a disguise and does it imperfectly. The smile is wrong, because whatever is behind it doesn't truly understand what smiling means. It's mimicking human behavior without comprehending the why, and that disconnect creates something deeply, fundamentally wrong. Story 11 takes us into the realm of collective horror. With the left-right game in 2017, a journalist documented her experience following an online urban legend about a road game. The rules were simple. Get in your car at night, turn left, then right, then left, then right. Continue alternating until something changes. According to reports, if you follow the rules correctly, you'll eventually turn onto a road that shouldn't exist. A road that's not on any map. A road that leads somewhere outside normal geography. The journalist joined a group led by a man who claimed to have played the game multiple times. They set out at midnight, carefully following the left-right pattern. At first, nothing unusual happened. Then, after the 20th turn, they found themselves on a road they didn't recognize. The landscape had changed. The sky looked wrong. As they continued deeper into the game, reality began to break down in increasingly disturbing ways. They encountered other players, people who had been playing the left-right game for years, for decades, unable or unwilling to find their way back. They found towns that existed outside of time, where the residents had been waiting for them specifically. They discovered that the game had rules beyond the simple left-right pattern, rules that revealed themselves only when you'd gone too far to turn back. The journalist's final entry was fragmentary. The road is changing behind us. I don't think we can go back anymore. We passed a sign that said welcome home, but none of us are from here. We've never been here before. How can this be home? There's something following us. I can see it in the rearview mirror. It looks like our car. It looks like us. We're going to take the next left. If we don't come back, tell everyone not to play the game. Tell them the road only goes one way. The left-right game taps into our fear of getting lost. But more than that, it represents the terror of realizing you've made an irreversible choice. Every turn takes you further from the world you know. Every mile puts more distance between you and safety. And once you've gone far enough, there is no turning back. The roads you took are gone. The world you knew is gone. You are in a new place now. A place that operates by different rules, and you are at its mercy. Think about choices you've made in your life, small decisions that led to big consequences. What if reality is more fluid than we think? What if there are decisions, actions, rituals that can shift us into alternate versions of the world? And what if we're doing it all the time without realizing? Each choice taking us further down a path that we can never fully return from. Our final story, the 12th and most disturbing, brings us to the phenomenon known as autopilot. This story is unique because it's not supernatural. It's a documented psychological phenomenon that has happened to hundreds, perhaps thousands of people. It starts innocuously. You wake up, you follow your morning routine, shower, breakfast, drive to work. You're so accustomed to the routine that you do it without thinking. You're on autopilot. One morning, a man followed his routine perfectly. He showered, dressed, got in his car, drove his usual route to work. He parked, walked into the building, sat at his desk. His co-workers greeted him. He responded. Everything was normal. Then his phone rang. It was his wife, asking why he wasn't at the funeral. He'd forgotten. In his autopilot state, he'd completely forgotten that his daughter had died 2 days earlier. He had driven past the funeral home to get to work. His mind, unable to process the grief, had defaulted to routine. But the story gets worse. He stood up from his desk, walked to his car, and drove to the funeral home. He was still on autopilot. He walked into the viewing, saw his daughter in the casket, and felt nothing. His brain had shut down the parts responsible for processing emotion. He was a robot going through emotions. It wasn't until 3 days later, when his wife found him sitting in their daughter's room, that he finally broke. And when he broke, when the autopilot finally disengaged, the realization of what he'd done, of those 3 days he'd lost to unconscious routine, destroyed him. He had been awake, functioning, interacting with people, but he had not been present. Some part of him had shut down, and he had continued anyway. The story has been repeated with variations. People who experience trauma and then, hours or days later, realize they've been going through life in a fugue state, performing complex tasks, having conversations, driving hundreds of miles, with no memory of any of it. What makes autopilot so horrifying is that it can happen to anyone. Your brain, in an attempt to protect you from overwhelming emotion or stress, can essentially turn you off. You become a biological machine following programmed responses. And the terrifying question is, how do you know you're not on autopilot right now? How do you know that the person you think you are is actually present, and not just a collection of learned behaviors running on automatic? What if you've been on autopilot for days, for weeks, for years, and you just haven't realized it yet? What if the real you has been locked away, screaming silently while your body continues to function, and you won't wake up until something forces you to confront the truth? These 12 stories, from the impossible geometry of the backrooms to the psychological horror of autopilot, share common threads. They exploit our deepest fears: fear of the unknown, fear of losing control, fear of isolation, fear of entities that exist outside our understanding, fear of technology, fear of our own minds. They remind us that the world is stranger and more dangerous than we like to believe, that there are cracks in reality, and sometimes we fall through them. But perhaps the most terrifying realization is this: every single one of these stories started with someone who felt safe, someone who thought they understood how the world worked, someone who believed that reality followed rules. And then something happened, something impossible, something that made them realize that safety is an illusion, that the rules can be broken, and that there are things in this world, and perhaps beyond it, that are waiting for us to notice them. So tonight, when you're lying in bed, trying to sleep, pay attention. Pay attention to the sounds your house makes, the creaks and groans that you've learned to ignore. Pay attention to the shadows in the corners of your room, the ones that seem to move when you're not looking directly at them. Pay attention to your reflection. Does it move exactly when you move, or is there a slight delay? Pay attention to the people around you. Are they who they've always been, or has something changed, something subtle? And most importantly, pay attention to yourself. Are you really present? Are you really awake? Or are you on autopilot, going through the motions while something else watches from behind your eyes? The internet has given these stories immortality. They spread, they evolve, they infect new minds with old fears. And somewhere, someone is experiencing one of these phenomena right now. Someone is slipping through reality into the backrooms. Someone is seeing their doppelganger. Someone is hearing whistling outside their window at 3 a.m. Someone is realizing they've been on autopilot and can't remember the last week. These stories are warnings. They're breadcrumbs left by people who experienced something impossible and live to tell about it. Or perhaps there's something else entirely. Perhaps they're instructions, rituals disguised as stories, designed to make you think about these things, to make you aware of them, to open your mind to possibilities that should remain closed. Because awareness, as we've learned, is a double-edged sword. Once you know something is possible, once you acknowledge its existence, you've opened a door. And some doors, once open, can never be truly closed again. Sweet dreams.